All right, we're going to try this a little different. Yesterday, you had to read the primary sources about photographs. Monday, we did it as a class. Today, I'm going to give you a video to watch, and then you're going to do some activities with it. So today is primary sources, oral histories. The historians and archaeologists describe historical events and issues from perspectives of people living at the time to avoid evaluating the past in terms of today's norms. This is what we're working on, how we look at things from the past without applying today's norms to them because things have changed. And I forgot to put the second standard in here, so there's really two slides right here with the same standard. All right, so an oral history. What is an oral history? What are they? Well, oral histories are the collections of people's reminiscences, accounts, and interpretations of their past in their own words. They are a record of an individual's direct feelings and opinions about the events in which he or she was involved. Often, oral histories provide information about significant events that may otherwise lack documentation in written or archival records. Oral histories are obtained through interviews and are preserved on audio and video recordings, in film, and in written transcripts. Historians study oral histories as primary sources, so that first-hand experience, and recognize the advantages they have as source materials. Many times, oral histories record the experiences of individuals who were not able or who lacked the time to leave written accounts. The interviewer's questions often create spontaneity and candor that might not be present in a personally written account. If you write something down, it doesn't have as much of feeling as when you speak it. Moreover, in a recorded interview, the informant's voice may reveal unique speech characteristics and tone that could not be captured in other sources. Oral history presents challenges in analysis. Memory is fallible, meaning our memory can fail us. It might change. The reliability of the informant's information may be in question. One must ask, is it consistent with the informant's previous recollections? Or the informant may intentionally or unintentionally distort the event or their role in it, thereby compromising the record's validity. How many times have you changed a story just to get out of trouble with your parents? Because I know I did it all the time. So some oral histories have things like that. Further, where am I? One must ask, does this concur with other sources? If we go to other sources, do they line up? Further, informants may be reluctant to discuss certain topics, resulting in an inaccurate or an incomplete record. As with all sources, oral histories must be evaluated along with other documentation to determine whether they present information that is exceptional or conforms to previously established patterns. So you know how when someone gets in trouble and we get story A and story B and story C and story D, it's because we're making sure they all line up. Same as we have to do with oral history. So someone's telling a story about the past. We have to make sure they line up with what we know. So what are some strengths? What are some limitations? And what are oral histories? So oral histories, they are the record of an individual's reminiscences, accounts, interpretations of the past in his or her own spoken words, obtained through planned interviews and preserved through the use of audio and video recordings, film, or written transcripts. We already have that. We read through that already. The oral history informant is the person being interviewed. So if you ever do this, it's the person you're interviewing that is the oral history informant. What are some strengths? Well, it's a personalized history by recording an individual's remembrances or opinions about his or her life or an event in which he or she has resolved. Okay, so TikTok, everyone with their story times, those are oral histories. They provide information about a topic or time period that may otherwise lack documentation in written or archival records. They often convey emotion clearly. You can hear what someone has to say. You can hear the sadness or the pain or the excitement in their voice. Contains a story element appealing to students. Would you rather be told a story or listen to someone or have to read a paragraph? I would rather listen to a story. It contains spontaneity and candor, not always present in a personally written account. When you're writing, you write the facts. Promise me, I promise you, not promise me, I promise you that this year you will hear that spontaneity and candor in my stories as we learn social studies. It's just a thing that's going to happen. May contain unusual dialect or speech patterns. Many movies about history, we hear those different speech patterns, those different things that were the way they speak that we don't get in writing. And if the informant is living, they may be consulted for clarification, meaning we can go, hey, what'd you mean? We can look it up. Now, limitations. There are quite a few limitations with oral histories. The memory is fallible. That's the biggest thing. Our memory is not rock solid. Our memory can change. We might think we remember something, but then if you go ask someone else who was there, they either don't remember it that way or you have totally changed a detail. It happens. It may include intentional or unintentional distortion of an event or one's role in the event. Maybe it changes. It depends. May contain inaccurate or incomplete record because someone doesn't want to talk about it. Oftentimes, World War II veterans refused to talk about what they saw and what happened during World War II because of the trauma. So their stories don't include that. So we're missing that. It's incomplete. The informant's testimony may be inconsistent from one interview to the next. So maybe I interview someone and they tell me one story. Then you interview someone and they tell you another story. And then Ms. Renshaw interviews them and they tell her another story. They can be inconsistent. They may include bias, goals, or the relationship of the interviewer to those being interviewed. We have to keep all of that in mind. Interviewers' questions may exert intentional or unintentional influence on the informant's response. Things like that happen. We might try to draw out answers or elicit answers, and we can't do that. We can't lead someone to tell us what we want to hear. They just have to tell us. May contain unfamiliar words or phrases from another time that are not clarified. Our language changes. The language that is used now is different than even what I used when I was in school. It changes, it modifies. The bias of the historians in the interviewer may become evident in the edited version of the interview, comprising the permanent record. If it's too long and it gets shortened, they might take out key pieces that don't go with the story they're trying to tell. Oftentimes you'll hear they're just trying to tell a narrative. Well, that's what we mean is that they took the full thing and cut it down to just this bit of it, and it doesn't tell the whole picture. They are the mutual creation of the historian and the person being interviewed. The person being interviewed has to agree. They can't just, I can't talk to you and not have you agree to answer the questions. Am I going to get anything out of it? And it's always important to evaluate oral histories along with other evidence. We have to look at documentation. We have to look at pictures. We have to look at other oral histories to know whether they present information that is valid and goes along with what we did. So there's a lot with oral histories that we have to be careful of. So some background information about what we're doing today. You are going to listen to a 6-part series about World War II. So here's our background. During World War II, the United States faced the challenge of having to support soldiers fighting thousands of miles away in North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Europe on the islands in the Pacific Ocean. Nearly everything that the U.S. and Allied troops needed for the war effort arrived via ship. Troops, tanks, planes, ammunition, fuel, food, even toilet paper. Thousands of ships, many of them of the type known as Liberty ships, were mass-produced in America's shipyards. These ships were crucial to the Allied war effort. Civilians in the United States Merchant Marine served as crew members on these transport ships, traversing dangerous waters in the North Atlantic and the Pacific. Some 290,000 men served in the Merchant Marine during the war, and many thousands died. One of those who served as a merchant mariner was Spud Campbell, born Arnold Spurgeon Campbell in Walker County, Alabama in 1921. He was recruited and trained as a radio operator by the United States Coast Guard. Beginning in the spring of 1942, he worked on Liberty ships, crossing the Atlantic several times while supporting the invasions of North Africa, Sicily, and southern France. In the oral history included in this activity, he talks about his experience working on his fourth ship, the SS Henry Bacon. So what we're going to do here real quick before we go listen, is we're going to look at those questions that you're going to answer while you listen. So this is all attached in your Google Classroom. Remember, just like I've done the others, you're going to have your slideshow and then your document that you have to answer. Again, we double click to type. So your questions. Remember, we can also zoom in because you guys tell me you can't read it. Guess what? I can't read it either. I like 100%. It doesn't get too big then. All right. Find out and write down as much as you can about the informant, name, date of the interview, location, personal circumstances, and the topic of the interview. If possible, also note the interviewer's name and affiliation. So, who's speaking? What people, places, and dates do they mention? What topics is the informant discussing? Does the informant reveal any emotions about these topics, such as excitement, sadness, or happiness? And then, all the way at the top, what kinds of words or phrases does the informant use? Are any of these unusual? If so, write them down and find definitions for them using a dictionary or Google. We have Google now. Google works great. Do they tell you anything about the informant's character or history? What was the informant's role in the events he or she describes? And then thinking further, how was the informant affected by the events he or she describes? How does the informant and his or her unique story fit into the broader history you are studying? So right now we know we're studying a little bit about World War II just as an example, but as we go forward, there's going to be some examples that you get to use as we're learning about history. Although, to be fair, ancient Greek isn't going to have a whole lot of oral history. And then how could information obtained from other primary sources reinforce the informant's story? Does the informant mention any previously unknown aspects of the event that deserve further exploration? Are there things you didn't know? Write them down. What you might do while you're listening, keep these questions in your mind, maybe pause right here, write them down, print them out if you have it, or get a sheet of notebook paper and jot down your answers so that you can come back and type in this later. Don't try and do it all at once because then you get all jumbled and it gets confusing. It might be best for you to have something to write. Also, when we go back into the slideshow, there is a transcript in here so you can go read what was said. So we're going to go back into the slideshow and hope this works. All right, so Spud Campbell. Spud Campbell describes the sinking of the Liberty ship SS Henry Bacon by German aircraft on February 23rd, 1945. So remember, he was born in 1921. He was 24 at the time. 16 merchant mariners and 12 members of the Navy Armed Guard were killed in this attack. Listen to the 6 stories below and complete the Analyzing Oral History worksheet. So that worksheet is what we just looked at. So if you need to get those questions ready or get a way to get it ready, go ahead and pause right now so you can get those ready. If you want to do it on your own, you can go find this slide. Each one of these links is the audio. So part 1, clues about the mission.
So I traveled back to my next ship, which was in Boston and was the SS Henry Bacon. And when I first saw the ship, I took note of the fact that it was battle weary looking, like I was really. It had been through a lot, and it had been in dry dock, and I noticed they had added reinforcing along the sides of the ship, and they also had added a lot of new radiators for heat. And when I went aboard and met Captain Carini, Captain Alfred Carini, who was to be my captain and my very good friend, he had been at sea a long time, and he knew where we were going. He didn't tell me. He just said when I brought up the fact that it seemed to have Arctic-type gear aboard, he said, well, you can just draw your own conclusions about where we were going. So I did. I knew at that time that it had to be the dreaded Murmansk run, because I'd heard a lot about it and read about it, where many ships, sometimes almost all of a convoy, had been destroyed by the German Navy, which had been stationed along the coast of Norway after they invaded and occupied Norway. But I did, after second thoughts, I did decide to stay aboard and to make that trip because I was curious.
All right. So arriving in Murmansk. So that first audio told us a little bit about what was going on. Go ahead and take a few notes, add them to the worksheet, get your thoughts together. We're going to go ahead and go on to the second part. You can pause this if you need to.
We managed to get around Norway and over to Murmansk, which is well up above the Arctic Circle. It's like almost to the North Pole, you might say. And it's only navigable in the winter like that because of the Gulf Stream effect, which warms the water to some degree. So you don't have icebergs, you don't have frozen water there, although the temperature is below freezing. And we finally got to, after about 10 days of travel, we arrived at the little city of Murmansk. But we did see the city when we picked up souvenirs and that sort of thing, what little was available. And we unloaded our cargo, which was mostly war materials and foodstuffs, but we had locomotives and tanks and guns and that sort of thing on deck as deck cargo. And at that point, as usual, I had no duties to speak up in port. And they were very strict about sealing the radio room because they didn't really trust us, even though we were friends and we were helping and we were in joint effort.
Sorry, my cat was stuck on the couch while I was recording. So they got to Murmansk. They did a few things. Go ahead and write down your thoughts, get them gathered. We're going to listen to the third part of the story now, Norwegian refugees.
Well, later, as we were anchored out in the harbor preparing to leave, we noticed a British destroyer coming alongside, and they deposited 19 people aboard our ship, and we learned that they were Norwegian refugees who had been picked up off the coast of Norway by the British Navy and brought to Murmansk, along with about 500 people who had been chased out of their homes by the Nazis, and they had lived in caves, if you can believe it, in the Arctic in winter. And so they were put aboard our ship. We had no facilities. We did make room for them, given places to sleep, and we gave them a chance to take a bath because some of them, they had lice and all sorts of problems. And so we took these people aboard as passengers on a ship that's not equipped for passengers, but we had enough food for them and whatnot.
All right, so they picked up some refugees in Norway, but they didn't really have space. All right, so a little bit more of the story. Let's go to part 4.
And we headed back out to sea, and immediately we were attacked, and a couple of ships were sunk right outside the harbor. And they picked up survivors from those ships. And then we headed on out to sea around northern Norway, and we were attacked by aircraft. And our gunners were able to hold them off the first time. And the weather suddenly became tough. We had a gale force winds, which broke up the convoy. We couldn't stay together. Our rudder was damaged, and this had lasted for 2 or 3 days, and it was so rough that we were not able to sleep on the ship because you couldn't even stay in bed. You'd roll out of the bed if you tried to sleep. But we had our duties also. I had to stay on duty because of the attack by the aircraft. And after 3 days of this and being isolated, our ship had strayed back behind the convoy, and we had no escort at that time. So the planes came in again, and someone counted 23 torpedo bombers heading toward our ship. Our one little ship with a cargo of humanity. And they attacked us, and our gunners, who were very, very proficient in their activity, they downed 5 of the Nazi planes before they finally hit us with a torpedo, and we realized that the ship was doomed. Captain gave me a message. I sent out a distress message that we had been attacked and gave our position, and I got an answer from Scotland. The convoy up ahead did not acknowledge it, but they heard it. They didn't break radio silence, which would have given away their position.
All right, so they got attacked by some planes. Let's see what happens.
So at that point, the ship was fatally, mortally wounded, you might say. And the captain realized that, and he started giving orders about launching lifeboats. They found 2 of our lifeboats of the 4. We had 4 lifeboats, and 2 of them had been so damaged in the storm that they were not usable, and we had 2 left. So the captain, on the first boat, he put all the Norwegians, the 19 Norwegians, who consisted of young babies, little children, up to old men and women, and he put them aboard one lifeboat, and he assigned me with my little lifeboat transmitter to go aboard with them, along with 6 young seamen who would handle the lifeboat. So we were launched into that, and we pushed away from the ship safely, even though the water was still very rough. And I was able to erect 2 masts together and get the antenna erected, and to get my little black box to working so we could send out a signal that could be used for beaming in to pick us up. With all the work I had to do, I became seasick.
All right, so we're done. They're hit, they're out in the lifeboat. Did you listen to his voice and how he started talking once they got in? Listen to this last part. It's called Witnessing Loss and Survival. Listen to his voice and how he talks, as well as the words.
And after hanging over the side for a few minutes, I was back to work again. And we saw the ship as it slid into the water. The captain's still aboard, and 26 of our crew, about half of our crew, who had to go in the water, were drowned and frozen. A few that went in the water survived and were picked up later by the British destroyers that came back from the convoy. It took about 3 hours for them to get back, and they came alongside us, and we had to first we had to get all the young ones onto the destroyer by well, the condition of the water was at one instant you'd be 30 feet below the deck of the destroyer, and the next instant you're level with it. And each time we were level with it, we would hand a baby or one or some old person to the crew on the destroyer. And this was the SS Opportune, HMS Opportune. And and then we finally got everybody aboard, and then I scrambled aboard and passed out. I didn't remember a thing after that until the next morning. And I was awake, and realized that I was in about 2 feet of space from my bunk to the one above me in an area in the bow of this destroyer, and I was alive. That was the best news. But after cleaning up all the stink and vomit and stench of my condition, I was able to maybe have a shot of brandy, which is the British Navy's way of treating people. And we spent a week on that ship. Then we came to Scotland. We were met by the Crown Prince Olaf of Norway, who was in England at that time. The royal family had escaped and came to England during the war. And he met us and was very grateful for the fact that we were able to save those 19 people.
All right, so he witnessed loss and survival. Take some time now. Fill out those questions that we talked about at the beginning, those analyzing questions. Are there things that you know, what words or phrases did he use? What was his role? How was he affected by it? Take some time to really think about what's going on. If you need to go back and listen again, or if you just want to go read it, because sometimes reading words is better, I have the transcript list linked right here as well. So you can go in and here it is. It's everything that he says, all the way through all of those. It's all right here. So you can come read it as well. So if you ever do this, some tips for designing and conducting an interview. Many steps are involved in creating a permanent record of an interview. You have to organize your project. So determine the topic, write at least 5 basic questions, and avoid yes and no. If you just get yes or no, I'm not going to elaborate. I'll say yes and move on. Make sure that they're open-ended questions that require the person to give you a detailed answer. Locate an informant through family, friends, community, and online resources. The informant should have experience with the topic you wish to discuss. So find someone who's knowledgeable about what you're doing. Set a time and place for the interview. And be sure to consider, don't set it for 8 o'clock at night if it's going to be a 4-hour interview. You don't want to be up interviewing someone at midnight. Practice by interviewing someone else. Maybe you practice with each other or a family member or a sibling. It's important to create an index that will allow you to find valuable passages from the interview later. So I don't have that here, or I might have that. See the other data to collect during oral history interviews. I do have that on the next page. So part 2, the interview. If possible, collect items that might help stimulate. If it's an older person, you might want to bring some cool memorabilia. If it's a friend, maybe be like, hey, remember that time we did? And bring something from it. That helps jog memory and go, oh yeah, I remember. If you're using a video recorder, flash recorder, computer with microphone, or cell phone, check all equipment to be sure it's working. If taking notes, be sure that paper and writing utensils are in order. Have enough paper. Make sure everything's charged. Begin the interview by stating the time, place, date, your name, and the name of your project. Ask the informant for his or her name, birth date, and early life story. We didn't hear any of that in what we listened to, but it's important so that the whole record has that. Ask your questions. Allow the informant plenty of time to answer. It's going to be awkward. You're going to sit there and stare. You know how I sit and wait for you guys to answer? It's awkward. It's okay. Think time, quiet time is okay. If they don't understand what you said, they can clarify. Or if you don't understand what they said, be like, I think I heard you say, or can you clarify that? It's okay to ask. It's important to understand. And always respect your informant and their wishes during the interview. If they don't want to answer a question, please don't push them. There are things that you don't want to talk about. Don't make them talk about it. After the interview, always thank people. It's polite, it's kind, it's the thing to do. Listen to the recording to be sure it's audible and read your notes for corrections. Note any points that need clarification. Transcribe the information as soon as possible if you need a transcription. Chances are you need a transcription if you're doing an interview. And transcribing takes a long time. You have to play a minute, not even a minute, it's like 10 seconds and then write, and then 10 seconds and then write. We talk a lot faster than we do write. For storing your recording, burn a DVD or CD copy. Dude, this is super old. Upload it to YouTube. Save it to your Google Drive. Put it on your phone. Find somewhere. Note why you chose, and attach a brief description of the project. Note why you chose your informant. There's a lot of other places. This is some old information because even I don't do that anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. Other data to collect, CD or DVD number. If it's a multi-series, you're going to need to know which interview in a series it is. The informant's occupation, their address, the date of the interview, the length of the session, the place, the title, the interviewer, the interviewer's address, others present, and the interview. Obviously, you need the interview if you're doing an interview. Come on. List an order of subjects discussed, localities, dates, names of persons mentioned. Leave a blank column in your notebook so you can note each important statement's location on your recording. So you're going to want, when you're transcribing or taking notes, you're going to want to have your notes, but have some space so that you can take notes about who it's about or where it's about or what date it's about, because that'll help you organize it later. You want to practice? Here's a bunch of links to go find out about other things. A More Perfect Union, Japanese Americans in the US Constitution, America on the Move, Whatever Happened to Polio. There's one about Julia Child, about inventors. There's a whole bunch of different ones here. We were doing on the water stories from the maritime events, and we did Spud Campbell. There's 5 others on that page alone that you can go listen to. Then there's also all of these links that have oral histories. The Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, History Matters, and then there's tips for reading recording oral histories at StoryCorps and Modern Inventors Documentation Program. So there's a lot of places you can go get oral histories. And I forgot to delete the rest of this slideshow. It's a science slideshow. Oops. Oh no. That is nothing you need to worry about. All right. So go complete analyzing oral history for the 6 parts we listened to. If you want more practice, go pick another one. Do your questions, send it to me. Make a copy of the document and send it to me. I'm happy to look at it. If you have any questions, I'll be available via email today or clever message or sending me a note on the assignment. But this is what you're going to do. So if you need to go re-listen, open the slideshow, go click those links and re-listen to the story. But your goal is to complete these 2 worksheets here with your thoughts about Spud Campbell and the sinking of the HSS, or not the HSS, we're not the British, the SS Henry Bacon. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you guys on Thursday.